couple of quick housekeeping notes about GoToWebinar before we get started. You can expand or hide the GoToWebinar control panel by clicking on the orange arrow. So if you don't see the control panel right now, there's probably an orange arrow icon somewhere that you can use to expand it. You have audio options for both telephone or computer speakers. Simply click on the audio tab to select those. If you select phone call, you'll be given a dial-in number and access code to be able to follow along here. If you haven't yet downloaded Tom's slide deck handout, you can go to the handout section and you'll see the PDF in there called the Anticipatory CPA. And finally, if you have any questions during the presentation, Tom is going to be answering questions throughout the presentation, and I'll pay attention to questions as they're coming in and interrupt him with those. So if you have any questions, just open up the questions tab, type in your question, and make sure to click send, and that'll come through to me so I can get it on to Tom. We do offer 1 CP for this webinar today based on active participation during the live presentation. Active participation is demonstrated by attending the live webinar for no fewer than 50 minutes, responding to all 3 poll questions during the webinar, and I should actually say today 4 poll questions, not 3. And finally, after the webinar is completed, you'll see a post-webinar survey launch right after the webinar window is closed. And we'll send a link to that survey by email afterwards as well in case you don't see it, and you simply fill out that post-webinar survey, and that's part 3 of being certified for CPE today. CPE certificates will be emailed to you within 2 business days after eligibility has been determined. Today is another in the 2017 Expert Webinar Series. AccountantsWorld sponsors this every year, and this year's is the biggest yet, bringing together accounting's most innovative minds to help you move your practice forward. Our next expert webinar is going to be Brian Tankersley of K2 Enterprises, presenting CPA Firm Technology Trends 2017. So if you'd like to get very up-to-date, research-based information on software solutions out there, both for your firm and for handling some of your core services, as well as supplementary services as well. There's no one who knows more about that than Brian does, and I encourage you to please attend that. That's going to be on August 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern. So again, same day of the week, same time. And you can sign up for that at awwebinars.com. If you've already signed up for all of the expert webinars at once, that's great. You should receive a reminder email about Brian's presentation shortly before it takes place. A brief word about AccountantsWorld. AccountantsWorld is the pioneer in cloud-based solutions for accountants. We've been doing this for 15 years. That's actually longer than the term cloud computing has existed. And our mission is to use cloud technology to help accountants grow their practices. And the way we do that is by helping you regain control over accounting and payroll services. AccountantsWorld is also committed to always putting accountants first. We never sell our solutions directly to your small business clients. Instead, we sell them only to professional accountants and make them fully collaborative for both you and your clients as well. The result of that is an accounting solution called Accounting Power and a payroll solution called Payroll Relief, as well as 5 other solutions. And both of those have been 5-star rated by CPA Practice Advisor. If you'd like to learn more about our accounting and payroll solutions, you can visit AccountantsWorld.com for more information and also sign up for upcoming webinars related to both accounting and payroll. I also wanted to mention that we have a special webinar right now, which is called Forget Value Billing, Think Value Building, Learning 5 Ways to Build Sustainable Value for Your Practice. And this webinar is really dedicated to decision makers of public firms who are looking to grow the profitability of their core services and who aren't quite sure how to do that. So if you're looking to be able to grow your practice without needing to hire additional staff or take on new additional clients, both of which can be burdensome, this is definitely the webinar for you. And you can register at AccountantsWorld.com. Just scroll down a little bit on the homepage and you'll see a registration for that. Before I turn it over to Tom Hood, just wanted to say a brief bio of him. I know many of you are familiar with Tom and his work. Tom is the CEO of the Maryland Association of CPAs. Tom is the top-rated speaker at the intersection of accounting leadership, learning, technology, and collaboration. And he is currently ranked #2 on Accounting Today's Top 100 Most Influential People list. That's actually his 12th time overall on that prestigious list. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Tom Hood and turn the presentation over to him.
Awesome. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And I'm going to pull my screen up, and let's see if this is working. So I'm going to go into presentation mode. How's that looking there, Div and Sharon?
That looks great.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, certainly thank you for that kind introduction. I like to say I'm #2, which means I try harder. And today we're going to talk a little bit about this idea of becoming an anticipatory CPA, how to get ahead and stay ahead. I think a couple things that we've learned is that everybody's extremely busy, and it's beginning to feel like we're all running the Red Queen race from Alice in Wonderland. I don't know if you remember that. There's a piece in that book or story where Alice is trying to run and keep up with the Queen, and she basically says, you're running as fast as you can, but you're pretty much standing still. And I think that it captures this, how we kind of all feel today. So let's talk about what, wait a minute. Looking for my control to advance it. There it is. I better. Okay, my slide, there it is. All right, now I got it. So let's talk about kind of the environment that we're seeing. Let's talk a little bit about what we see in the environment, and then we're going to get into what's it mean to all of you in accounting and finance. So this quote, we were at the AICPA council meeting, which is kind of the governing body of the CPA profession, and Barry Melanson, who's the CEO of the AICPA, made a reference to the fourth industrial revolution. And that's a book I would recommend for your summer reading list. But this quote comes from Klaus Schwab, who was speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland this past, I think it was in March. So every year, all the world leaders, business, greats, sometimes some of the actors and, all the elites in the world get together and talk for a couple days in Switzerland about what the future looks like, kind of from a global standpoint. And so Klaus Schwab, who's the CEO of that gathering, kind of shared a bunch of the research that he's talking about. And he said this: we stand on the brink of a technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another in its scale, scope, and complexity. The transformation will be unlike anything humankind has experienced before. Now, I just wanted you to think about that a minute. Is that something that, how many of you guys would say that's kind of, you don't think it's going to change that much? Because that's pretty bold stuff. And every time I've talked about this, the consensus seems to be people say, you know what, it could be that big. And I think the key words in his quote there get to this idea of scale, scope, and complexity. I would actually add and speed, because I think we're starting to see this acceleration driven by exponential technologies, which we're going to talk about, that's starting to make things move a bit faster. And I think I want to talk about how can you get ahead in a world of accelerating and even exponential change. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, this is me with Pepper the robot, and this was at Sage Accounting Software show about a couple months ago in Atlanta. Now, if you look behind that robot, what do you notice on those little stands there? Yeah, if you guessed it, those are Alexa speaker systems that are wrapped with the Sage logo. So Pepper is an actual robot that's being deployed in the retail sector, and it literally has human motions, it can understand, it gives you eye contact actually. That thing on its chest is like an iPad that will actually tell you what it's hearing you say and respond back with what it tells you in a voice, but also types it out so that you can see what it's saying. And it was fascinating to watch that robot find me and then move over to me and begin to interact with me. Now, the other piece is, at that same show, there was a chatbot called PEG that's actually plugged into the accounting software that actually begins to, you can like ask it voice questions and it will begin to respond like who owes you the most money or those kind of things. So I think the point is that the technology revolution and all the areas that it's starting to do is coming faster and faster. And I think that's why I'm kind of excited about AccountantsWorld. I think some of the things that they're doing to enable CPAs to run good, solid business practices, right, to help businesses account for things and take care of things is pretty exciting. But this is the type of stuff that we're seeing. These technologies are happening all around us, and it's worth paying attention to what's happening. So I want to ask you this question. What's the #1 reason business and organizations fail? And I'd love to know, you know, if we were live, we could hear some of your actual responses, but I'm guessing some of you were saying maybe they're certainly cash flow or competition. Some might say failure to adapt. And the definition I like, this comes from a futurist named Andrew Zolli, is he says that they miss the weak signals of disruptive change. And you start thinking about that, right? What's the weak signals of disruptive change? So actually, I'm doing this webinar from Denver. I'm out here to keynote a conference tomorrow, and coming out, the pilot was saying, buckle up, we're starting to see turbulence. So clearly, he could either see the clouds and storm systems, or the tower and radar, weather radar, gave them a warning that said, rough stuff up ahead, beware. But how many times have you been on a plane and the pilot didn't come on ahead of time, and you started feeling the chop and the bump, and you know, you hold on to your seatbelt a little tighter, and then the pilot comes on and says, buckle up, flight attendants, get back up here into the cabin. So apparently that phenomena is called clear air turbulence. It's actually turbulence that, despite all the modern technologies and everything that's out there, that pilots and the air traffic control systems cannot see ahead of time. And I think that's what Andrew Zolli means about this notion of weak signals of disruptive change, right? Some of that stuff might be things that are almost invisible to us. And I think if there's one thing that I've learned is that in a period of faster change, we have to start thinking about how can we look out a little further or see around the corner a bit to kind of maybe see those weak signals of disruptive change. And later on, I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth, but we're also seeing it in your client base. So half of the members that we deal with in Maryland are often small business, mid-sized business, even large business, CFOs, controllers, et cetera. And in our most recent stuff, we're going to ask about this later, but they're starting to feel lots and lots of disruption, and we're going to poll you guys to see what you think about that a little bit later. But all right, let's talk about it. So what does that mean, these weak signals of disruptive change? Well, another indicator of that, this would be the retail stores. Apparently this year we're going to see 9 major retailers go out of business. Now you start to think about like what would make them go out of business, and it's the invisible stuff, right? What's causing these retailers to go out of business? I'm sure you guys would all say it's the internet, right? I mean, yesterday was the big Amazon Prime sale, and now today a lot of retailers are trying to adapt. You know, certainly like Walmart apparently is making huge inroads in the e-tailing industry. But the fact is, despite all the sophistication everyone has, a lot of these guys couldn't adapt or couldn't adjust or couldn't see how fast those weak signals of disruptive change were actually impacting them. And so I think it's true for all of us as CPAs and accountants to say, are these weak signals impacting our clients? And could we even help them see those weak signals of disruptive change and maybe advise them differently from that standpoint. So let's talk about kind of some ways that we've been thinking about this. So we actually sought professional help about 3 years ago. So we had started seeing more and more things about this accelerating pace of change and disruption. Obviously, if you read any of the key magazines, Accounting Web, Accounting Today, Journal of Accountancy, you're seeing more and more things about this whole technology, artificial intelligence, et cetera. So we reached out to a global futurist, a guy named Dan Burris, happens to be a best-selling author, a book called Flash Foresight. I highly recommend it. I've read it, and I would add it to your summer list. So Fourth Industrial Revolution, and this one would be two really good ones. But in there, he talks about Flash Foresight. He says how to see the invisible and do the impossible. So interesting enough, Dan, in his work, he's worked with lots of these big, giant global companies, but now he's working kind of with us to help keep our profession future ready, if you will. And his specialty is how to anticipate future trends and begin to identify both opportunities and predictable problems that might come with them. And we're going to share some of his principles in today's thing about how to get ahead and stay ahead. So his point is, trying to keep up is almost futile. He would say best practices are almost too late these days. And so what are you doing to actually position your business as CPAs and accountants even, or your clients' businesses, so that they can actually thrive in an era of rapid change? And that's what I hope to talk through with you guys today and talk a little bit about that. So I want to talk about this number one challenge, and I think we're going to ask you guys to answer a poll right now that we can push out that says, what do you think the number one challenge is? So we got a couple of answers that you guys get to select. So I want you to go ahead and figure out which one of those is your biggest challenge.
Oh, and it looks like we just ran into a little technical glitch.
I was going to say, give me a second, Div. I'll get that poll re-entered here.
Okay.
Perfect. And while I'm doing this, if there's any questions you guys can be throwing at us. Oh, good. Somebody, you were actually answering my, all right, good. So this will work. Someone said cash flow is the challenge with keeping up. Voice quality is not good. Is that coming from me right now? There's bad human resources. And then it looks like a couple technical things going on there.
Yep, so we're just, to bear with us, folks, we'll have the question back up in a minute. And just to sort of prep you, this is the first poll question that will be required for CP, the first of 4 poll questions today, so it will be up shortly here. And the question is going to be, what are your top challenges? And while Sharon is putting that back up, I can actually tell you what the 5 choices are, so you can start to think about what you'll be voting. The choices here are going to be, is your top challenge lack of growth or profitability? Number 2 is staff development, training, retention. Number 3 is being proactive versus reactive. Number 4 is succession planning and generational control. And number 5 is new accounting technology and information technology. So bear with us for just a moment here, and we'll have that question ready for you.
All
Sorry
right,
about that. The poll is open.
Good work. Okay, and the votes are coming in.
Okay, folks, we've got Over 85% of people have voted, so if you haven't gotten your vote in yet, please go ahead and do so as soon as possible. And just a reminder, voting in all 4 of the poll questions is required in order to earn CPE today.
Okay.
All right, so we'll take just 5 last seconds here for anyone to get their votes in. Going once, going twice. Okay, so Tom, it looks like our leader here is over 53% being proactive and reactive, keeping up with changes. And then new accounting technology, information overload came in second, followed by staff development and lack of growth or profitability.
Yep. Okay, so kind of good, interesting stuff. Whoops, let me get, there we go. So it's funny because we've been polling now for about 2 years with CPAs all across our profession, and your answers are pretty much in line. It is interesting that being proactive versus reactive and keeping up seems to be the #1 challenge. And then you start looking at it, then there's overload, the accounting technologies, information overload, staff development, all those are legit. Lack of growth and profitability, you look at that's 4th, and then succession planning is 5th. Certainly larger enterprises are seeing more and more of that as a big challenge, but all of these are relevant. This is interesting because in my opinion, this survey that we saw is a couple years old now, but there's that being proactive as the #1 reason that small to mid-sized businesses, that's what SMBs are, leave their CPA. So it kind of struck me, and a couple things. If you look, fees are actually 5th on that. So not giving proactive advice, poor responsiveness, referred to any new firm. So what I worry about is in an age where everybody's busier and busier and busier, and we're all trying to keep up, and we're all doing everything we can to just stay up with what's going on, how can we actually be good at taking time to be proactive and serve our clients the way that they want to? And I'll give you a quick story. In my prior life, before I was CEO of the association, I was a CFO in highway construction. And I'll never forget, we were in a really, really disruptive time. We had a big real estate recession. We were in highway construction. Anyhow, market turned down dramatically, like 2/3 in 1 year because of some major things that were going on. So we had our auditor coming in, and we were in a second year of significant losses and doing a whole lot of things to, layoffs and trying to cut costs and everything else. And the auditor's in reviewing the audit with me and is kind of reading the footnotes and saying, let's go over how everything looks and is everything right, which is important. And during that, knock on the door, my controller comes in and says, Tom, we have to meet payroll this Friday, and we needed like $500,000, I think, in a couple days. So as I said, all right, let me, Jerry, I'll get with you in a couple of minutes. Let's when I finish this up. So when he went back out the door, what do you think the auditor did at that point in time? Did he say, hey, what's going on? I know how bad the numbers are. I obviously did the financials, and what can I do to help you? Or did he just keep reading the audit report and reviewing what we had? And if you guess the second one, you're right. That's what he did. So the fact is, that was a turning point, right? Because after that, the auditor left, we met payroll, and the next week I started looking for another advisor that we could use to help us do projections for our bank and bonding company and cash flow analysis and all that. And when I broke the news to our CPA firm that we were switching, now we kept them with the audit and the tax part, but the partner goes, well, we do those kind of services. How come you wouldn't even think of us? I said, well, I've known you for 10 years. You've been the auditor of the company for 15. And in that time, you've never once talked about the future. You've never once asked anything that would lead me to believe that you had any ideas about our industry or what was going on in the market or how we're doing. You never even mentioned how bad our financials looked and what are we doing about it. So do you think I would actually put my company in your hands if that's all you talk about? So I think that's a significant piece here, right? So I would encourage you guys, I hope that this isn't any of you, and certainly that with your largest clients, you're actually taking the time to say, let me make sure I'm looking at what these numbers mean, and I'm being proactive and saying, what can I do to help you, and here's some of the things that I can do if you need them. So I think that's kind of the key point I want to kind of exclamation mark around this whole presentation. So this is another survey that that we saw in 2014. This is probably the main thing that made us seek out professional help as we did with Dan Burris. But it's this idea of being future ready. So the AICPA and their CPA.com subsidiary did a survey about the future readiness of CPAs. And lots of questions, but effectively their definition of future ready is the capacity to be anticipatory, aware, predictive, and adaptive of emerging technology and trends in business demographics and the social environment that might be impacting your organization, your industry. So the point of that is, aware, do you know or see the trends coming? This is where we talk about the weak signals of disruptive change. Can you predict what those trends will mean to your firm and or your clients if they continue? And then adaptive is, what can you do to adapt and get ahead, right? Jump ahead by being adaptive of trends that you actually can see and rely on. So I think, but it was fascinating to look at how many CPAs, 92% of the CPAs said that they weren't future ready, and it was because they answered questions like, do you think 3D printing will impact business in the next, I think they said 10 years, going out to literally like 2025. And most of the CPAs, 92%, said, no, I don't think that's going to have any impact. Do you think artificial intelligence is going to have an impact? No, they didn't think about that. So, or demographics and the succession planning and the, all those trends, they basically went, I'm not really, I don't know what they're doing, and I haven't really been thinking about them. So I think that was the clarion call to say, we got to do something. And that's what we've been doing, and that's how we've been working with Daniel Burris and this idea of anticipation. So this is another slide that came from Barry Melanson at the AICPA meeting. But now this is large corporate, but the point is in the next 3 years, they believe are more critical than the past 50 years. So all the stuff that went on in the last 50 years, they think the next 3 are going to be as big or bigger. And 4 in 10 are transforming their businesses into significantly different businesses in the next 3 years. 62% are using disruptive technologies to improve services, and 65% will start looking at alliances and partnerships. That all adds up to this idea of man, things are getting fast, and it is fast because it's exponential. And if you know anything about exponential, it starts out linear, like it looks like it's linear until it's not, right? So it's 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. So actually, if you took 30 steps, you would cover roughly how much? A step is about a yard, so 30 yards. If you took 30 steps exponentially, how much ground would you cover? Let's take you back to your 7th grade, logarithmic and exponential math. And the reality is it's over 1 billion, so 1 billion yards. Do you see the difference? Like 30 steps incrementally in a linear progression versus 30 steps exponentially. So we're actually on exponential curves when you start looking at some of the stuff that's going on in the technology arena. Another way of thinking about this is this idea of VUCA. And Bob Johansen coined this for business, but it came out of the U.S. Army War College in Pennsylvania. And it stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world that we live in. Now, it got coined after the Great Recession of 2008 because after every recession prior to that, those of you guys who've been in recessions, what's the first thing we ask after it's been a year or two in the recession? You pretty much start to say, When will things get back to, I hear you saying it, normal, right? As we all say, when's it getting back to normal? Well, after the Great Recession of 2008, did things get back to normal? I would suggest that I don't think they have. And every time I've talked to CPAs all around the country, they pretty much say, yeah, no, it didn't. And that's why we've called it the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. You know, all the words about all that stuff, we're in brand new territory, and we see that continuing. So I think this world we're living in, and with recent things going on both in political and the geo landscape, I would say we could confirm that. So VUCA is the new normal. And so now it gets back to what can we adopt as techniques to thrive in the new normal. Now I'm going to give you a couple of what I would call some scary stats, and then we're going to talk about what that really means. Also double check, see if there's any questions coming in, Div, right now, anything happening there? Doesn't look like it. It looks like sound seems to be a trouble for some people. Is my sound not going well?
I think we're okay right now.
Okay.
Folks, if anybody is still having issues hearing Tom, you can go ahead and write in, but most of the feedback we got recently was that it was good.
I love some of the answers to my, this is good, this audience is pretty fun. So about the auditor, at least he didn't come in to amend and qualify his audit report. We actually did survive that. But yeah, so the auditor wouldn't be independent if he gives you advice. Well, that is true, but it's also a matter of, shouldn't he be at least saying, what is it that you could use to help survive and be part of facilitating that conversation?
By the way, Tom, I'm going to jump in for just a second. A question came in from Keith who asked, will there be any good news in the presentation?
There's a lot of good news. All right, so I know you're looking at this auditor thing. So this is a Oxford University. Hopefully many of you have seen it or heard about it. It's been around for a while. And anyhow, this is about what professions are going to get automated. We're among lots of others. By the way, we were in the top 4. The worst is call center employees. And the safest occupations for any of you guys who are looking for a clear way to beat the machines would be become a member of the clergy or a massage therapist. Those are not likely to be automated by robots in the near future. So I think we got to figure out how we do this right. So I want to talk about now some of the positives, right? So this is where we're starting to see where growth is in our profession. So you can see audit is rather slow. We know it's been talked about as being commoditized. And when you get into the tax arena, the stuff that's building the most value is what we would call consultative tax. It's cost segregation, it's R&D credits, it's tax planning. Those kinds of things have been driving. This is in the top 100 firms, so I get it that many of you might not be in that category, but it's also relevant as it moves down into the entire profession. And then the fastest growing market is this area of advisory services. And in fact, the top growing service among the advisory services, certainly there's valuation and litigation support, et cetera, but actually the fastest growing one is client accounting services. And worth doing a plug here to our sponsor, but AccountantsWorld has got some really good systems to help you with that service, designed for accountants to make it easy to track those things. So if you're not doing what I'd call consultative, proactive advising services, I think you want to think about that, right? Because these other services, you're going to have to become a very competitive, low-cost producer. All right, now let's talk about what's going on in auditing, right? So how will audit change? Well, this is where you're seeing a whole lot about artificial intelligence, and the basic message is it's going to turn us more into analysts. We're actually going to let the computers do more of the work computers are good at, and we should do more of the things that humans are good at, which gets to this idea of the relationship, the heavy advice about what do some of these numbers mean, and then ultimately helping our clients actually be more proactive themselves. So we have to be proactive to make them proactive. So let's talk about a couple more things, right? What we're finding is that sometimes our profession doesn't recognize the stuff that's out there competing from out of nowhere, and in this case, Watson's the big one, right? So Watson, you've probably heard about the Watson KPMG auditing thing, and you've probably heard about IBM Watson powering H&R Block. So we're seeing it at both the retail tax side and the big giant CPA firm. But actually artificial intelligence is breaking into all kinds of areas, and it's actually a good thing, and some of it you might not even realize. So some of these systems that are on even small business systems are starting to see artificial intelligence power the applications that they're using. And the two examples here, obviously Uber and Airbnb. The other thing that's worth looking at is disruption often doesn't come from inside your industry. So I think, again, for you advising any of your clients about these weak signals, you would say, are you watching a little bit broader than just your industry? Because Uber didn't come from the taxi cab industry, and Airbnb did not come from the hotel industry. But now let's talk about the good news, which is how you can actually learn how to ride these big waves of change and not get swamped over by them. So I love that quote by John Kabat-Zinn, and I think it's very true in the terms of these big waves of change. I'm going to talk to you really about, in fact, context, understanding that broader external world and how it's coming at us, and the notion of certainty. Capacity is how you might use technology to actually create time, become more efficient and effective. And then competence are what skills you might need for the future. The last one is core beliefs, and I think that just gets back to making sure you understand what your purpose and your values are, and you use those as a guideline about what you might think about when you start looking at some of these future trends. So now let's get into, like, how do you do this? I think it requires a new mindset. So I think somebody was saying, is there any good news? I think the notion here is your view of the future will impact how you ultimately will succeed or thrive in this environment. So if you're looking at these trends that are coming at us and say, oh my God, I'm scared to death, then that could be a pretty dangerous spot, right? What you have to do is start saying, how can I understand these things and begin to position myself and my firm from an opportunity perspective? So I want everyone right now to kind of take a breath and say, where am I going to find opportunities in these things, and what can I begin to do to understand how this stuff could actually be used to my advantage and my client's advantage? Because the good news with this technology stuff is it is becoming available just about everywhere, and it will move through our whole cycle quicker than ever because primarily of the cloud. So what I want to do is kind of get you thinking about an anticipatory mindset to say, how can you anticipate disruptions before they disrupt you, problems before you have them, and opportunities before your competition? That's kind of the whole theory behind what Dan's been doing in this flash foresight world. And I think the other part of this is one piece of advice, and we're doing it ourselves, we're working through our own transformation in the association because of this type of trend work, is that it's better to initiate change than to wait for change to be forced on you. So I think if there's another big opportunity here is to say, how can I start to begin to do these steps for my firm or my practice or myself before I'm forced to do it? Because if these trends continue, it's going to be disruptive, and I'd like to kind of cut that off at the pass. So I want to talk about this notion of agility versus being anticipatory, right? So agility is being able to react quickly after a change occurs. It's great for unpredictable change, and we're always going to have that. And it's good to solve problems after they occur. And it might provide an opportunity over that slower competition. But I think being anticipatory means, how do I turn this change into opportunity, identify and react to change before it occurs, and identify and solve problems before they occur? I'm going to give you some tips to help you get to this point where I think you can actually jump ahead a little bit. But I'm going to caveat that you're going to have to take a little bit of time to do that. So the notion here, and I think the biggest concept we've learned, is this idea of starting with certainty. So when we talk about these future trends, the first thing you might say is, I can't predict the future. And there's no way that, everything, it's all unclear. It's like a big fog. And how am I going to see through any of that to know like what I should pay attention to or what I shouldn't pay attention to? So here's a couple things. First of all, here's the really good news. The future is going to be and continue to be really about relationships. So despite all this automation, everything we hear is that the point of having someone to look you in the eye, and that could be looking at you through a visual communications, right, on an internet connection. And the notion of trust is still going to be human. So the machines might do a lot of our work, but we still going to be the ones that if we use it right, those relationships will be critical. And that gets back to the idea of being proactive. So again, you're going to want to make sure that those relationships that you really, really rely on, big customers, large customers, your suppliers, your critical vendors, that you maintain and build those relationships. The other good news is that our profession continues to maintain extremely high trust in the public, in the government, if you will. Investors have a huge faith in external auditors as well as internal CFOs. So we do hold a lot of trust and esteem, and you combine that with relationships, and that is a big secret to the future. Now I'm going to give you this framework to start thinking about trends differently, and you can actually apply to predict the future a bit for both you and, again, your client, because I think that's critical for all of us. So there's two types of trends. Hard trends, which are, in fact, future facts. They're going to happen whether we like it or not, and you want to do that as best you can. Soft trends are trends that might happen, and so those are a bit different in that they could change. So I'll give you an example. You might look at like the supply of CPAs. There's a lot of people saying that there's fewer people getting their CPA quick enough. So that trend would be a downward trend, right? If you drew a little line downward. Now the question is that trend likely to continue? Well, there might be evidence that says it looks like it is, but it could be changed. And in fact, in the last couple of years, we've been working as a total profession to flip that around. And we're seeing some changes. Firms, companies are actually doing some things to encourage licensing. That's how you change a soft trend. A hard trend, and we'll talk about the three big ones, those are ones that are going to happen whether you like it or not, and we'll talk about what that means. So here are the three big hard trends: government regulation, technology, and demographics. And those are all going to happen no matter what. So no matter what the administration is at the federal or state level, you're going to see increases in government regulations and standards. Why do you think that's true? Why would that happen? Well, because there's new stuff all the time, and we're always having these new regulations, environmental, all those kind of things. And we'll talk about that. So if you've got clients that are in regulated industries, you should be sitting there going, if these are going to continue, what could I do to help my client around these things? Certainly taxes and healthcare are two that we're dealing with, but there's a lot more out there. Technology is another one, and demographics. So let's get into that and show you some of these. So hard trend is demographics, 5 generations in the workplace. You guys have heard about this, but the hard trend is 10,000 baby boomers a day retiring. So, and the shortage of Gen X, we know it's about half of the number of boomers, which means the next generation to replace us, those of you who are boomers, are, that's where the big talent shortage is coming from. So the talent shortage is actually a hard trend, which means you're going to have to say, what could I be doing differently than just running one ads to fill these spots? So right now we're going to ask you a poll to see what your demographics are online here. So let's push that poll if you would, Sharon. And there it is. Let's see what we got.
All right, so the question here is, which generation do you belong to? So please go ahead, excuse me, and select one of the 5 options. Make sure to click the submit button to make sure your vote is counted there.
And Tom, while the poll is going on, we do have a question, more of a statement. What are future facts? If we know them now, aren't they just facts?
Well, usually when you think about something that's about a future prediction, yes, you could argue they're still facts. I think the notion of putting it in the term of a future fact says this is about the future versus a fact that comes from the past. So I think that's the distinction that we would make.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, so we've got over 90% of people having voted, so we'll give just 10 more seconds here for the stragglers to get their vote in. And remember to click the submit button. This is the second of our poll questions today. All right, going once, going twice. Okay, so Tom, we are 58% baby boomers online today, 23% Gen X.
Yep, so that's interesting. That's almost like statistically valid. I love that there's a Gen Z on there. Greetings to my Gen Zer. Gen Xers, I know you guys are sick of hearing about boomers and millennials, so I call this Hug Your Gen X Year. And boomers, you guys are the ones that are beginning to retire and transition, and certainly mature falls into our greatest generation. So it's good to see everybody on here. We're not going to cover, you guys have seen a lot of work about, the point about demographics is certainly from a opportunity perspective, this is where certainly planning around estate planning, succession planning, helping your clients deal with this hard trend, right? Because it's going to continue. The labor shortage is a function of the hard trend of demographics, the shortage of Gen Xers in the marketplace. And so you've got to start saying, what can I do to creatively solve that? Well, we've said, for instance, firms who go, I need a manager, and that's the shortage of Gen X, we'd say, go build one, right? Take a high potential millennial and begin to do something different there. So start thinking about, if I've got a hard trend of demographics, what am I doing in my firm to help my clients who might have this problem in my own firm situation in terms of how am I going to deal with succession planning? So government regulation, another one, same idea. This one is, think about what industries are regulated, and it might be just beyond the whole tax and accounting standard thing, but what else you see? I know a firm in the Midwest here who's an ag firm, and they ended up working on representing their clients before the feds with all kinds of environmental regulations. Now, probably a larger firm, but the point is you might have expertise that you could apply to not just tax compliance, but other regulatory compliance. All right, government regulation. So what opportunity do you have?
Hey, Tom, can I jump in for just one sec? Because you covered demographics, there's a question that came in from Kevin. Is there really a talent shortage, or are older generations simply not willing to adjust to how younger generations want to work?
Well, the answer to that actually is both. And the answer is there is really a talent shortage. Gen X is a true shortage of people physically in the marketplace. And the notion of adjusting the way people work, that's a function of technology, right? So now the newer generations, X, including X, but certainly millennials and Gen Z are technologically adept, and they want to do more things remotely, just like you're doing this webinar. So the answer to that is yes, both, and they are both driven by hard trends, which means if you ignore them, they're going to create predictable problems, right? The shortage will get more acute. You'll have more challenges finding and retaining talent. Those are examples of what happens when you don't deal with a hard trend. So I want to just cover this quickly. You guys all know this, but the fact is, this is what's driving a lot of this. I found one article that said all the stuff that's in your smartphone, if you actually added it up when it came to market, it would be worth about $1 million. Thinking back to the baby boomers used to carry around big video cameras and all that stuff's in your phone. And that's driving a whole lot, right? Mobile is a big trend. So this is the top trends that major firms in Maryland identified as things that they had to pay attention to. So this is where I would say, this is something you should say if you don't know anything about this stuff, which ones are most likely impacting your clients. So for instance, mobile apps, if they're in the retail business. What else could be, can you virtualize or automate processes? Can you do more analytics for them? What can you be doing to automate or accelerate what you're doing in audit and tax? These are examples where you could sit down and spend some thinking time looking at these things and doing a little bit of homework and then saying, what opportunities can I find given that these are hard trends? I think we're going to push one more slide to you right now about, are you guys moving your systems to the cloud? So let's pull that question up.
And that should be up right now.
And while you guys are voting, I'm going to talk a little bit here, but this is the whole point, right? The cloud, because the cloud is, in fact, transforming lots of this stuff. So this is how these technologies that were on that other slide are actually converging and combining and accelerating. So artificial intelligence, big data, Internet of Things, these are all things that are like moving together, and the cloud is enabling it because the cloud is actually distributing computing. So the fact is they can actually use processing power from all over the world powering these supercomputers, which is why everything from gene sequencing to doing using Watson for analytics for auditing is starting to happen.
All right, and we've got 91% of people having voted at this point. If anybody has not yet voted, please go ahead and do so in the next few seconds here. Remember to click the submit button as well.
So it looks like a chunk of you are working on, the majority are working on it or already there. 27% just starting and 4% are still wondering what the cloud is. It's not what's in the sky, I will tell you that much. There it is.
There it is.
So my advice to you guys would be hard trend. Cloud is a hard trend. You can see the stuff that's here about how you transform things. And so I would encourage you to research more about that, learn more about that, get moving. Obviously, AccountantsWorld is a cloud accounting system, and I think they were one of the first guys in the cloud. So AccountantsWorld is one of those guys you should be looking at and talking to from that standpoint. So how can you use any of these technologies to transform every business process you have, whether it's Google Docs, and a Google platform, Microsoft Office 365, all the new tools allow you to collaborate and accelerate all kinds of things. And this is some stuff that's really for you to use after today. But these are examples of all these hard trends that are beginning to impact how business processes and transactions are beginning to change. And that's a good thing, because now you can spend more time using your accounting knowledge to look at the data and interpret it instead of just waiting to, getting the data right, which is what we spend most of our times with. So we've talked about this stuff, artificial intelligence. These are just examples of what we're starting to see. You're hearing all the stuff about autonomous driving and what that might mean. Every day there's more and more news, and this whole internet of things, you're going to see connections of everything, and that means there's a whole lot more data that you should start to be getting good at. So I think the key point here is to say, instead of thinking about how can I protect and defend, this stuff's never going to happen, these hard trends, technology, demographics, and government regs, are going to continue. How do I keep looking at the opportunities? And the other part is, what's a predictable problem if I ignore those hard trends? Because they're going to continue to happen to you and your clients. And I would say, what are you going to do to avoid that? So what can you do to redefine and reinvent things? This is Amazon Go's store in Seattle. They have no people in there. You walk in, you take stuff, and walk out. And the sensors check you out. And on the right is Uber's flying taxi. And they're going to deploy that for real in 2020. That's 3 years away, in Dallas and Dubai. So this stuff's coming, again, at a kind of good, fun pace. That means it's exciting times for us to be thinking about this. So another quick poll. So I want you to do that, and then we'll be moving into kind of wrapping up a little bit with a few more questions. So are you guys feeling any disruption? And I'm assuming most of you are in accounting and finance, but it'd be worth to see, are you feeling it? Because if you are, then you should be thinking about this kind of stuff.
Just a reminder, this is the fourth and final poll question. So please go ahead and select one of the 5 options and click submit there as well.
And I'm going to talk through this a little bit too while you guys are voting. When we did this with our CFO, nonprofit, and government group, the number was astonishing, and it grew significantly in a year. So about a year ago, there was about 48% who said they were feeling moderate to severe disruption. And the last one we did, which was just about a month ago, that moved up to 78%. So I think there's 2 things that says. First of all, they're feeling disruption, and secondly, it's accelerating. And I think, and you guys are showing a number which looks like, what, 57% are saying moderate to severe disruption in your practices or your industry, which would probably be mostly accounting. I should have polled that actually, but yeah, so how are we looking? Is that?
Yep, I think we're just about there, so I'll give this 5 more seconds here. If anybody has not voted, please go ahead and do so right away. All right, we'll go ahead and close that out.
All right, so I think you guys are indicating about what, so you're at 58% moderate to severe disruption. Now, I would say if there's one thing you should be doing proactively with your clients is asking them this question. Are you feeling any disruption, and if so, how or why? And are you aware of some of these weak signals of disruptive change? You could use this slide deck to talk about them, like the list of those technologies or the demographics or the government regulations, and say, are there areas that we could be helping you? Certainly, all small businesses complain about compliance costs. So what can you do to actually be more efficient and actually lower their cost and maybe swap that out for some other high-value services? Okay, so again, redefine and reinvent is the word you should be thinking. Here's a couple more things about what's happening in our profession. AI bots in accounting, tax professionals are going to be using more of this stuff. It'll be baked in to the software that you're using. We talked about the bot that we saw that was actually live interacting through Alexa. So you're going to see this stuff happening more and more. We've actually been disrupting ourselves with e-learning. This is our anticipatory organization learning system. So if you really want to go deep into any of these concepts, that is available on our website. And we've just started a partnership with IBM to begin offering education, and we think there might be good news here. We're hoping to do this for little or no cost, but to educate you about big data, cognitive computing, and these kind of things. But it's all online, and most of it's nano learning. It's a different way of learning than you might typically be used to. So I really want to kind of close this down with this notion. Mark Randolph, I got to see him speak earlier this year, and he said the key thing here is you need to disrupt yourself before someone else does. And I think the way you start is with the #1 app I think you all actually have, which is your calendar. And so I would say if there's one thing I want you to do from today is to spend 1 hour a week in the future. Take an hour, put it on your calendar like you would for a workout, and just sit down and say, let me do some scanning. No more catching up, no more emails. Just let me start looking at some of these publications online. Read up on some of those trends that you saw from today. Make a list, hard trends. Do I see government regulation, technology, demographics? Which ones are keeping me up at night? Which ones am I likely to see happening more in the future? And then start to say, now, what's the opportunity in that? Like, how can I flip this challenge into something that I can say, what can I do positively about that? And do that same list for your clients and begin to think about those areas, because you're going to spend the rest of your life in the future. And I think the key is you've got to adopt a future view that says, I can ride these waves of change and I can position myself for a future that's actually going to be pretty exciting, because all these tools are going to be at your disposal. All right, let's wrap up with any final questions that might be there. And I know, Div, you've got a couple of a wrap-up slide or two, correct?
I do. I've got a wrap-up slide here. One question that came in was on the cloud question. What about people who are aware of the cloud but may not want to convert to it due to security concerns, etc.?
Yeah, the research is, so firstly, I was talking to Dan Burris, the Department of Defense put all their systems in the cloud. They actually found out that the cloud is more secure than what we would call enterprise server-based areas. So I think the reality is it is extremely safe. You have to do some due diligence on your cloud provider. But if you're going on one of the big Amazon Web Services, Google, Microsoft Azure, any of those, and most of the software that's running in these areas are running on that stuff, you can actually ask for SOC certification or other things to make sure it's secure. So I think the answer is what we're finding is it's actually very much more secure.
That's great. Tom, did you have any more slides, or should I go ahead and take it back at this point?
They've got the deck, but I think we're at the time up that this is a perfect place to wrap. And they can look at the rest of the slides for research, kind of the links to the website stuff that might give them more ways of being anticipatory.
Okay, great. Well, Tom, thank you so much for all the information today. And as Tom mentioned, there's a lot more in the PDF. So if you haven't downloaded it yet, please go ahead and do so from the GoToWebinar control panel. We'll also be sending you a link to that in the email afterwards as well. I want to thank all of you for attending today. A couple of quick reminders. Make sure to fill out the post-webinar survey to make sure that you receive CP credit. You'll see that open up when you close out of the GoToWebinar window. We've got the upcoming value building webinar on July 20th or August 16th. It's offered on 2 different days coming up in the next month. That is really focused on how to grow your firm's profitability and bottom line without needing to hire additional staff or take on more clients. So if that's something that's of interest to you, and we know that it is for most accounting decision makers, we look forward to seeing you there. You can sign up for that at AccountantsWorld.com. And final pitch, 3 weeks from today is our next expert webinar with Brian Tankersley, talking about tech update for 2017. So thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at an upcoming webinar. And Tom, thank you again for your time today and for your presentation. If anybody has any final questions for Tom, you can go ahead and write those in at this point. But Tom, thanks so much.